Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Fellow Feeling. This will be Part 5, Chapter 5, entitled Out of the Frying Pan. For one horrifying moment, the world stands still. But then Shouta hears water, gushing violently from what must be a busted pipe, and he springs into motion. Bakugou! For a long moment, nothing greets him but rushing water and silence. But then Bakugou splutters, coughing out water, and there's a rasping, "Aizawa-sensei! The wall!" But coughing overtakes him again before he can finish. He moves quickly to the wall of rubble, trying to assess its thickness. It looks like some kind of impact on the surface had led to this new cave-in, the tunnel's structural integrity probably having been damaged by the building's collapse. Pushing at the stone with his good arm, his stomach sinks as he realizes that it's solid. But there, at the top of the wall, there's a gap. Gritting his teeth as the motion jostles his broken arm, he seeks out footholds in the debris and climbs the few feet it takes for him to be able to reach the gap. A few good yanks dislodge enough of the rubble for him to climb through, and he maneuvers himself through the narrow opening he creates. His boots splash in an ankle-deep pool of water when he lands, so cold that it turns his toes numb almost immediately. The collapse has created a narrow space with rubble walls on both sides, a broken pipe sticking through one of the shattered walls. Water gushes from the pipe, the flood so torrential that the small gaps in the debris aren't big enough to accommodate it. The space is flooding, and quickly. "Bakugou," he starts, having to yell over the sound of the water. "We need to—" But then he stops, his breath stolen away as he gets a better look at the situation. Midoriya is slumped against one of the walls that hasn't yet collapsed, choking as if he'd inhaled a lungful of water, but otherwise unharmed. He looks up at Shouta with glassy, terrified eyes, and though his mouth moves, nothing comes out. Bakugou is on his side, arm pinned beneath the rubble. He'd pulled Midoriya out of the way, Shouta realizes, but he hadn't been fast enough to get out of the way himself. And there's no way Shouta can lift that rubble alone. Cursing, he drops to his knees, tugging at the wall as if he might be able to dislodge it. But as predicted, it's solid. It only has the effect of making Bakugou cry out in pain. "You have to blow up the wall," Shouta yells over the flood. But Bakugou just shakes his head, lifting a hand in emphasis. To Shouta's horror, the most he can muster is a weak pop that can't even be called an explosion. The water has washed away his sweat, and it's so freezing that he can't produce more. The water is rising, and Bakugou's head is so close to the ground that the flood has already crept over his cheek. Taking a spluttering breath, he cries, "Deku! Get Deku out of here!" Shota's stomach lurches. "No, we have to bring down the wall. Keep trying to use your quirk." Bakugou gives an almost hysterical laugh, humorless and terrified, and his palm crackles uselessly against the stone that pins his arm beneath the water. Shit. The water is rising fast, and there's no way he can knock this wall down without Bakugou's explosions. He's supposed to be their teacher. Why can't he protect them? His quirk just isn't suited for rescue operations. There's a reason he used to work as an underground hero instead of a rescue hero. No, the person whose quirk is most suited to this situation is Midoriya. Shouta drops down beside him, giving him a shake. Midoriya, I need you to focus on me." His student gives a few sluggish blinks, a jolt of that familiar, quirk-induced fear gripping him the instant he locks his eyes with the man kneeling over him. But either the venom is starting to wear off or the weight of his injuries is overriding his fear, because he gives a dizzy but relatively coherent nod. It'll have to do. "You have to use your quirk," he calls, having to speak loudly to make himself heard over the roaring water, even so close to the kid's ears. Then, when Midoriya's body lights up with stuttering sluggish green, "Not now. Wait until I tell you." Another blink, slow and confused, but he doesn't protest as Shouta maneuvers him into position, extending one of his arms so his fingers are pointed at the rubble pinning Bakugou to the ground. Carefully, so he won't hit his classmate when he strikes. They'll only get one shot at this. In the moment Midoriya uses his quirk, Bakugou will have to roll out of the way to avoid being struck by falling debris. He tries not to think about the fact that when Midoriya uses his quirk, his already severe condition is likely to deteriorate even further. It's not like they have a choice. "Ready," he yells to Bakugou, who gives him an openly terrified nod. "Now!" Midoriya flicks his fingers, and Shouta erases his quirk the instant the first bit of wind pressure flies from his hand. The result is ideal, the first thing that's gone right today, in fact. A concentrated blast of wind shoots down the chamber, cracking into the rubble, pinning Bakugo's arm to the ground, and the consequent spray of stone and metal allows the explosive hero to pull himself free with a pained cry. Water washes out of the chamber, released by the debris that's been blown down the corridor, and no fresh wave of destruction takes its place. For a moment, Shouta allows himself to feel relieved. Bakugo coughs and splutters, expelling the remaining water from his lungs. You idiot, he chokes, shooting a furious glare in Shota's direction. You should have left me here. Deku's going to... Midoriya is fine, he bites out, even though it's obviously not true. The backlash of his quirk has left him even more dazed than before, his eyelids fluttering in a desperate attempt to stay awake, his breath growing short and distressed as his body struggles to accommodate the physical toll of his power. There's a hatch not far from here. We can make it to the surface and get help. Bakugo looks at him like he's gone insane, raises his uninjured arm, shaking from the cold, and points behind him. So Shouta turns, and then he pales as he realizes that Midoriya's quirk has had such an intense backlash in the already damaged tunnel that the gap in the wall behind them has been sealed, swallowed up by a thick layer of debris. With that half of the tunnel sealed off, there's no way to access the maintenance hatch that lies a mere 50 feet in that direction. And between Bakugo's inability to work up a sweat while he's cold and Midoriya's impending unconsciousness, there's no way to dislodge the wall. A spark of Bakugo-esque anger builds in Shota's chest. How much more can the world throw at them today? Midoriya is slipping away, and with the tunnel blocked, their only way forward is to go back the way they came and search for a hatch in the opposite direction. And who knows how long that'll take. Midoriya is already so close to death, will he be able to hold out until then? Not to mention, being doused in freezing water has only made his body temperature drop further. If he develops even a slight case of hypothermia, it'll be over. And now Bakugo is hurt too, shivering violently and nursing an arm that's at least fractured from being pinned beneath the rubble. Will he be able to keep carrying Midoriya? Suddenly, Shouta realizes that Bakugo is waiting for him to give some kind of order. This whole time, his student has been so hard-headed and opinionated about their next move, but now, exhausted and scared, he can't seem to muster his usual confidence. His students are depending on him, and even if it kills him, he's going to get them out of here. Quickly, he takes stock of the situation. Midoriya is looking worse than ever, shivering in near death, each breath producing this awful wet sound in his lungs. Bakugo is nursing a purpled arm and a nasty cut on his temple, probably from a chunk of rubble, and though his shivering isn't quite as bad as Midoriya's, it has terrible implications for his quirk. If he's cold and wet, he won't be able to fight. It's clear that Bakugo isn't going to be able to carry Midoriya any further. They aren't going to be able to look for another hatch, not as long as they stick together. And that means that Shouta only has one option. He has to go for help alone. It's not a good plan. He's afraid that if he leaves Midoriya and Bakugo alone now, Midoriya might not be alive when he returns. But Midoriya is growing weaker by the minute, and Bakugo isn't going to be able to lift him, not with that arm. Not when he's this exhausted. If Midoriya is going to have even the slightest hope of survival, Shouta will have to go back down the tunnel and find another hatch. Bakugo is sat down of his own volition by the time Shouta makes his decision, which is alarming in and of itself because it means that no matter how much he wants to keep fighting, he's simply too exhausted. He's still a child, after all. He only has so much energy to give. Silently, he maneuvers Midoriya to sit beside Bakugo. It's slow and painful. His arm screams at him with every movement. But after a short struggle, he's sandwiched between them, letting Midoriya lean his head on Bakugo's shoulder, and Bakugo doesn't even protest. "What are you doing?" Bakugo asks, slurring slightly. Now that his adrenaline from nearly drowning has faded, his exhaustion must really be setting in. "Going for help. I'm going to find another hatch and call Ryuku from the surface." Bakugo gives a tired hum in response. "Okay, just give me a moment, I can carry Deku." "No, you can't." "What? Fuck you, of course I can. I just need a moment to catch my breath." He huffs. "Bakugo, your arm is probably fractured, and Midoriya can't support his own weight. Do you really think you can carry him all the way back down the tunnel to find another hatch?" A pause, lengthy and bitter, until finally, "No." "Then stay here, and try to keep each other alive while I go for help. Don't let Midoriya fall asleep, and make sure that you stay awake too." A hint of uncertainty ticks across Bakugo's face. How How long do you think it'll take? Not long. I'll move as quickly as I can, and Ryuku should be able to clear the rubble and lift you out quickly thanks to her size and strength. Bakugou gives a shaky nod, like he's trying to convince himself that everything is going to be okay. You'd better move quickly. Deku is... I'm not sure. His breath hitches. He can't seem to finish the thought. I'm not going to let him die, Shouta promises, wishing that he felt as confident as he sounds. I'll be back soon. Another nod. Bakugou doesn't say anything more. And although Shota's every instinct is telling him not to leave his students alone down here, cold and bleeding, he knows that this is the only way. He turns and sets off down the tunnel. Deku, you have to stay awake. I'm tired. You're dying. Stay awake. A pained groan. I'm not sure if I can. You can and you will. When have you ever given up on anything? Silence. Midoriya's fingers curl weakly into the front of Bakugou's hero costume, his jagged fingernails catching on sodden fabric. His heart beats high and too fast, struggling to deal with the amount of blood he's lost. And the chill is only making things worse. You're going to be okay. An arm hooks around Midoriya's shoulders, holding him so tightly that it must be painful. My turn to save you this time, right? Kajan. Don't. I'm just evening the score. If you thank me, I'll kill you. This makes us even, that's it. A soft, weak breath. Even, Midoriya repeats as if in a dream, but he can't seem to get anything else out. Growling, Bakugou pulls his classmate even closer to himself. It's practically a hug, but neither of them dares to acknowledge it. Not now. It's too much. Kajan, did you hear something? What? He cocks his head, listening for a moment. No, what are you... Something clinks down the corridor. A bit of stone, shifting. Bakugou lifts his head. Aizawa-sensei. Another clatter. Someone is moving towards them. Growing alarmed, Bakugou extracts himself from Midoriya's hold. He's hurt, his arm is screaming, and his entire body is cold and nearly numb with pain. But something is down there, and as he squints into the dim light, he realizes that the footsteps are too heavy to be his teacher's. He is standing in front of Midoriya in a heartbeat, sinking into a defensive stance. He's still freezing, his quirk won't be as effective, but he's had his fingers curled and his head shoved in between their bodies, so he should have enough warmth for one good explosion. Kajan? Midoriya asks again, trying to sit up. What's... A chunk of stone whisks down the corridor fast enough to kill, grazing Bakugou's cheek as it flies past him. He drops, his instincts begging him to run away, but Midoriya's behind him, curled defenseless on the ground, and he can't just leave him to die. Heroes, comes a low, rumbling growl, one that sends ice straight down Bakugou's spine. A large, hulking shadow is approaching at the end of the tunnel, backlit by the dim lights, and the shriek of claws on concrete is almost piercing as it draws nearer and nearer. No. The heroes that tried to bring the building down on top of me. Bakugou snarls, holding his good hand out in front of him, but he doesn't stand a chance. His explosions don't work on this villain, he already knows that. But Midoriya's behind him, and he's not going to let him die, not now. Not after everything they've been through. If you come any closer, I'll kill you, Bakugou bites out, though it's an empty threat. Even the hulking, stupid villain can tell as much. He takes a defiant step forward and grins, his teeth pointed and reptilian, and rumbles. You ruined my escape, attracted the dragon to me, made me run away. I haven't gotten to thank you. A chill races down his spine. He should move. He should run. But he feels glued to Midoriya. He can't leave him. He can't. Shouta races almost blindly down the freezing tunnel, scouring the ceiling for another hatch he can use to access the surface. He tried to keep his cool in front of Bakugou, but he is by no means confident that this situation will end well. With the injuries Midoriya has sustained, his chances of survival are... well, his best chance of making a full recovery is for Shouta to bring help, and quickly, so he keeps his head down and moves as fast as he can, ignoring his own pain and exhaustion for the sake of his students. He's failed them so many times already, not just today, but over the course of their entire time at UA, and he's not going to fail them again. He doesn't care how high the odds are stacked against them. He will deliver his students to safety. After 5 solid minutes of running, he passes the place where they'd originally dropped down into the tunnel. And he shivers as he realizes that the hatch has been blocked by a layer of rubble. It looks like the rest of the building has collapsed. They would have been killed if they'd stayed there. It's another 5 minutes until he finally comes across what he'd been praying for, another ladder, leading up into the ceiling. He holds his breath as he climbs the ladder, wedging himself firmly between the rungs and the back wall of the vertical access tunnel, so that he can use his good arm to depress the latch that holds the hatch closed. And though it takes a bit of jostling, his heart soars as he feels the seal around the door pop free. Light floods into the hatch, blinding him momentarily, fresh air coursing down around him. And though he can hardly see, his entire body cold and aching, he heaves himself up the final few feet and rolls onto the pavement outside the hatch. He's outside. He's free. He smells smoke. It takes a moment for his eyes to adjust, but when he looks up, he realizes that he's come up in the middle of the city, and the city is burning. Most of the buildings around him are heavily damaged, and one of them, presumably the one that had collapsed on top of them, has been flattened entirely. There are fires spouting from some of the buildings, probably the result of frayed or damaged wiring, and smoke spits into the air in thick, heavy plumes. It has to be the work of the villain. When the building had collapsed, he must have escaped the fall and gone on a rampage around the city. Where is he now? Has he already escaped, or is he hiding somewhere? And where is Ryuku? "Hey, what are you doing out here? Civilians are supposed to evacuate. Didn't you hear the orders? I need you to—" Shouta turns, squinting, and the approaching hero stops in his tracks. One of Ryuku's sidekicks, he's sure of it. "Oh my, Eraserhead! You look terrible, are you okay? Should I call an ambulance?" Then, glancing around him, "Where are your students?" Shouta snarls his fingers into the front of the sidekick's costume, issuing a sharp, "Get every paramedic in the city over here and do it now. There are 2 kids trapped in the maintenance tunnels, and one of them is going to die if you don't move quickly." The sidekick recoils in horror. "The maintenance tunnels? Just call them." The sidekick stares at him like he isn't sure what to do, and Shouta snaps. "Why are you a hero if you don't know how to respond to a crisis?" he snarls, reaching out with his good arm and snatching the man's headset. "Those kids are going to die, and you're just going to stand there." He doesn't even bother putting on the headset, just raising the mouthpiece and biting out, "Ryuku, come in." There's a fuzz of static, then a shocked, "Eraserhead, we've been looking for you for hours. Where have you been?" "My students are trapped in the maintenance tunnels," he snaps, unwilling to answer stupid questions when the lives of his children are on the line. "One of them is critically injured. I need rescue and medical services here immediately." A gasp trickles through the earpiece. "You don't mean the tunnels beneath the building that collapsed?" she asks, audibly horrified. "Not directly beneath, but yes. We were in the building when it collapsed, and the tunnels were the only way out." "Oh no. I'm on my way, so stay where you are." Then through the main channel. "All personnel coverage on the collapsed building between J and L Street. There are injured children in the tunnels, and we need to dig them out immediately. Viper Eye, call emergency services at once." There's a muted response from the earpiece, but Shouta hardly hears it. He can't wait any longer. He has to get back into those tunnels now. "I'm going back down," he informs Ryuku. "I'll take one of your sidekicks with me and carry them out." "No, wait! You can't go back into those tunnels." "Why not?" he snaps. "One of my students could already be dead. I'm getting them out of there." "Eraserhead, listen. We believe that the villain has fled into those tunnels. If you go back down there, even with a sidekick to back you up, you'll be severely outmatched. I'm the only one that can handle this strength." He stops, dead in his tracks, swaying. The villain. After the building collapsed, he rampaged through the city, destroying whatever he could. I managed to injure him, but he escaped. He's large, so the tunnels would be a tight squeeze, but we found evidence that he'd forced a hatch open not far from the collapsed building. We were going to flood the tunnels to flush him out, but if your students are down there..." He's fairly certain that he feels his heart stop beating. Midoriya and Bakugou are already injured and exhausted. If they come across the villain, they'll be killed without a struggle. "I can't just stand here," he says, already kneeling to open the hatch once again. "I'm going back down. At least I can distract the villain if he appears." "You're useless to them dead. And that's what you'll be if you're the one that finds that villain. Believe me, my strength is hardly enough to hold him back. You won't stand a chance." "Neither will my students." "Eraserhead, you are a hero." He stops. "If you go down there, we're going to have to rescue you too, so if you want to save your students, the best thing you could do is stay back and let us handle this." She's right. He knows she's right. How many times has he been in a situation exactly like this, stuck waiting for heroes with quirks better suited to the situation to arrive? He's never acted like this in any of those situations, and this should be no different. He's a hero, regardless of the identities of the people he's trying to save. And if he acts recklessly, then Midoriya and Bakugou will really die. He has to wait. All right, listeners, this concludes the first half to Chapter 5. The second half to Chapter 5 will be up next. I hope you all are still enjoying this one. Let me know your thoughts and reactions to everything in this chapter, and as always, thank you so much for listening.